everyone, and welcome back to AMI's Mining Coffee Chat series. We're still letting in people into the call, so bear with us for a minute or two, and then we'll begin on this month's discussion, which is around the initiatives being undertaken by the Bolsonaro administration in Brazil to open up previously protected areas of the country to mining. And this should be a very interesting discussion. Okay, I think we should just get started. Alejandro, do you want to move us along, and then I'll begin the discussion around, set us up here. For those of you who are not familiar with AMI, we are a market intelligence firm that's been focused on Latin America and working exclusively in Latin America now, our senior consultants for 30 years. And we've been working in the mining space for about 20 of those years. We typically are contracted by miners or investors at two junctions. One is prior to investment, when they are conducting their country and counterparty assessment before investing. So trying to understand what are the risk factors involved in the project they might be investing in, to what degree can those risks be mitigated and at what cost, so that they can properly value the project and understand exactly what it will take to succeed at operating that project. Further on, we'll get involved with miners also as they prepare for their social license documentation and really trying to understand what is the substance of any opposition to the mine going forward, and trying to assuage those fears by understanding what they are exactly and who's behind them. Oftentimes at the very early stages of a mine, there's a series of partnerships that need to be formed, be it with local investors, be it with local unions, with local subcontractors, et cetera. And, most companies will take the time and invest in due diligence to understand who these partners are before collaborating with them. And once a project is up and running, there will be various junctures along the way that are challenging. And typically mining companies address the perceptions that they generate in a country through three budgets. One is their government relations budget, often spent in the capital, trying to bolster the image of the company and of the project in front of legislators and regulators. There's a PR budget, which in some jurisdictions is very important to make sure that there is public support for the project, everywhere from locally to nationally. And then there's CSR budgets, which really are increasingly important to keep community support for the mine. And all of these budgets typically are decided upon, the early stages of the year or the year prior, but they bear being adjusted along the way based upon intelligence that is gathered, intelligence that we gather on behalf of the mining company, or combination of our gathering that information and the mining company gathering that information. And so we are often feeding the process of updating the messaging and how the mining company addresses these three budgets, hitting the right note, hitting the right message, and targeting the right individuals and populations with that. So without further ado, let's move forward and share with you that we are a consulting firm hired by mining companies and investors to do these things. But we also put out a lot of information and thought leadership. You're probably familiar with our mining risk white paper that we published a few years ago, which you can download here. We regularly have these webinars that we record and then we publish on our website along with articles. Both Alejandro Álvarez, the co-director of the mining practice, and myself will be at PDAC later this year, and we will be distributing our newest thought leadership piece, the Mining Risk Index, which we previewed, some of which we previewed earlier this year. And on the next slide, I just want to remind us all that these national issues, including the very relevant ones we're going to discuss today, are just the tip of the iceberg. And so oftentimes project risk really is local. And so that means that the budgets you put together to win hearts and minds around your project, as well as the due diligence process, as well as the ongoing intelligence gathering, should be skewed towards the local area. There are exceptions, but that's really where most miners stumble and have their greatest challenges. And that's where we excel in terms of as intelligence gatherers and supporting consultants. So with that, I will pass the microphone to Alejandro to introduce our esteemed panel for today's very important discussion.
Thank you, John. And thank you everyone who is joining us today. It is great to have you. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by two leading experts in mining in Brazil. First, we are joined by Thiago Alves. Thiago is the director of the mining practice at how do you pronounce your law firm's name, Thiago? I don't want to mispronounce it. I'm not very fluent in Portuguese.
No problem. Rolim, Viotti, Goulart, Cardoso Advogados, lawyers in Brazil.
Thank you, Thiago. Thiago, as I said, leads the mining law practice at this firm. He works with environmental and mining law and has a wide experience in legal and administrative litigation. And he also works with topics related to mining, such as forests, water resources, agroforestry, climate change, biodiversity, solid waste, and perhaps more relevantly for our discussion today, he's also an expert on historical, artistic, and cultural heritage assessments of local communities and traditional populations, as well as energy, sanitation, and infrastructure consulting in Brazil. So thank you, Thiago, for joining us. We are also joined by Marco Dalmoro. I think Marco is now on the line. Marco, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Just in time.
Yes. No worries, Marco. Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you. Marco is a senior independent consultant who has a wealth of experience in the mining industry. He has worked with large multinational heavy industry companies such as Gerdau, Vale in Brazil, and in Brazil in particular, he has worked for a number of years conducting or structuring engineering and geological support for the development of projects from exploration to mine decommissioning. And this includes being a liaison with government agencies, unions, commercial associations, and communities, presenting the social and environmental impact of projects. So his expertise is very much suited to the topics we're going to discuss. And thanks again, Mark, for joining us. So jumping into the topic at hand, I will just provide a very brief overview for all of you who are joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing what can be considered the macro policy of the Brazilian administration towards mining for the past, let's say, 3 years, which coincides with the presidency of current President Jair Bolsonaro, who has been very vocal about promoting extractive industries in the country. There are currently 5 environment-related bills that are being considered in Brazil's Congress. We're going to be focusing on 2 of them, which are PL 191 and PL 490. But there are several others, and they all ultimately look to open the Amazon rainforest to mining exploration and exploitation. And in doing so, they look to change the borders of the indigenous territories that have been set for many decades in order to bring down the protections that are given to those communities and allow for more intensive mining activities. And there is a significant legislative push for these initiatives, but there is also significant community backlash. And it's interesting, as we will discuss in a moment, because the backlash or the pushback does not come only from environmental associations, environmental groups, the indigenous communities themselves, but also from the mining industry. And in recent weeks, we've seen large companies such as Vale or the Brazilian Mining Association, IBRAM, oppose these legislative initiatives because of the risks they present, reputational and towards the rights of communities in Brazil. So there is certainly a lot of back and forth over these initiatives. And in addition, President Bolsonaro has recently, in February of this year, issued a decree to drive gold prospecting in the Amazon rainforest. President Bolsonaro, his family has a tradition of gold prospecting. His father was a gold prospector in the 1980s. And perhaps with that background, he has been pushing for gold prospectors, which in Brazil are called garimpeiros, to be able to mine in the Amazon and in protected territories. These small and medium scale, sometimes artisanal miners, they don't have the same level of sophistication as large mining companies, and their mining activity carries by definition a larger risk to both the environment and local communities, as the government has a tougher time regulating them. So the initiative by President Bolsonaro is certainly going to create some concerns for the communities that live in the Amazon and the environmental advocates who worry that gold prospecting is going to further promote deforestation and other major environmental concerns that have already been worsening in Brazil. And finally, the latest development that we will be touching on took place on March, just a couple of weeks ago, when amidst the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, President Bolsonaro called for environmental protections in the Amazon to be lifted once again, so that fertilizers and especially potash could be mined and extracted from these territories, thus reducing the dependence that Brazil has on Russian fertilizers. As we will discuss, there is some controversy there as well, because in principle, not many of the potash reserves in Brazil are located in indigenous lands or in the Amazon, but still the government is pushing for exploration and exploitation in these areas. So that begs the question: why is the government looking to open these areas for that type of mining if there is not that much geological potential? And that is what we are going to be discussing. So with that brief overview, I would like to turn it over to our speakers, and I would like to begin with Thiago, discussing the bills that are currently in discussion in the Brazilian Congress. As I mentioned, the Brazilian Congress is discussing and may be close to approving PL 191, a bill that aims to open indigenous lands to mining and other commercial exploitation, and PL 490, a bill that would change the rules on the demarcation of indigenous territory. So there are a couple other initiatives as well in consideration in Congress. And Thiago, I would first of all like to ask you if you could please provide us with a high-level overview of these bills, and especially 191 and 490. Although if you have comments about any other bills that are currently in discussion that may influence mining operations, by all means, we would be thankful for your insights.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. First, it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Alejandro and John for the invitation. It's an honor to me to be talking to you today about these issues in Brazil. Also, I'd like to compliment and greet Marco, the other panelists here with me. And well, what I'm going to do is try to clarify some of the legal aspects related to these issues, like Alejandro already introduced. And I'm not sure, Alejandro, about my time here, but please, if I exceed the time, call me. I'm a lawyer. There's a problem of speaking here. I like to speak law, okay?
That's fine. I think maybe 5 minutes, let's say, for a brief overview, and then we can move to the next question.
Okay. Well, introducing this theme, I'm pretty sure you all, ladies and gentlemen, already know, but Brazil is a global leader in the mining industry, in the mining commodities, iron ore, copper, gold, aluminum, niobium, many others. The mining industry in Brazil has a strong and high economic relevancy. Approximately 2.5% or 3% of our GDP are related to the mining industry in Brazil. And the problem is we have some major mining deposits located inside these indigenous areas or located next, just around some indigenous lands and indigenous communities. So this is not a new problem. We've been facing this kind of problem for decades, but now since we are feeling this new boosting of mining investments in Brazil, this became a huge conflict and a huge problem between mining exploration and on the other side versus the need to take care and to preserve the Indian communities. This issue brings up some investors' concern about ESG matters and criteria and some controversy that we're trying to talk about here. About the bills, the projects of law that are addressed, you asked, Alejandro. The first thing I think we need to understand, I'll take a few moments here to tell you that because I think it's important. We need to make a reference to a constitutional rule, okay, of Brazil, a federal constitutional rule. There is an article 231 in the third paragraph of Brazilian federal constitution, and I'd like to read for you because it's a very short part of this. So this rule sets that hydric resources, including energetic potentials, may only be exploited, and mineral riches in Indian land may only be prospected and mined with the authorization of the National Congress, after hearing the communities involved, and the participation in the results of such mining shall be ensured to them as set forth by law. So this is important because, like I said, it is a constitutional rule, okay? And so the energetic generation in Indian lands and mining lands, it's not prohibited in Brazil. It's subject to certain conditions and aspects that must be ruled by law. The problem is the absence of this law. The Constitution of Brazil was approved in 1988, and until nowadays, we don't have this law to regulate this situation. So the Bill 191 of 2020 was presented to the National Congress by the government, the federal government, and intends to regulate the research and mining projects or energy generation in indigenous lands. It's a very complex theme, technical ways and some legal ways. I'll try to summarize this in 5 main aspects, okay? The first one is the necessity of the previous technical studies. So this bill of law intends that the companies that are interested in these projects in indigenous land must present these technical studies, and not only the companies, but these studies need to be supported by the National Indian Foundation, FUNAI, in Brazil. Also, what we call the free, prior, and informed consultation, FPIC. Okay, this is a rule according to the International Labor Organization Convention number 169. Brazil signed this convention. We must apply to that. This must comply with that. And this is a very sensitive issue. Okay, so how are we gonna consult the indigenous? How are the effects of this consultation? How are they gonna manifest that to the authorities? There is also some regulation proposed about the National Congress authorization that will be needed to each and every one mining project in indigenous lands. And this authorization must be requested by the President of the Republic, okay? There is also some articles there addressed to regulate the royalties to be paid to the indigenous communities. And this makes there some difference between the hydraulic energy, oil and gas projects. When we're talking about mining projects in indigenous lands, it predicts that 50%, half of the financial compensation, CEFEM in Brazil, must be allocated to these indigenous communities affected by the project. And also, but not least, or less important, the compensation that must be paid to the indigenous communities because the restriction of the use of their land. Also, like it's different than the royalties and the compensation, but both must be deposited in a bank account to be prepared and to be analyzed by the Indigenous Council. The main concerns or the main complaints of the bill, there are many complaints about this bill. I try to summarize it again. Strong opposition, not only by NGOs and indigenous communities leaders, but also politicians, the federal public prosecutor, which is a main concern here because he can present a file some lawsuits against the projects and also against the law, if the law being approved. So the main complaints are first regarding urgent procedure, okay? This bill of law, this project of law has been proposed and the National Congress applied it to the expedite regime. It was some kind to speed up the analysis of this bill of law. The society do not agree with that. They understand that this project is very sensitive, must pass to public meetings, public reunions, and the intern commissions of the House of Representatives and things like that. I don't know about the time, Alejandro. Can I do 2 more minutes? It's okay?
Yes. Go ahead, Thiago. I was about to follow up with you because large mining companies and the Mining Industry Association, IBRAM in Brazil, they have opposed these bills, claiming that they harm what you just mentioned, free, prior, and informed consent by local communities. By all means, please finish your summary. And once you do, I would like to get your thoughts on whether, in your opinion, this is a fair assessment by different stakeholders over the criticism of these bills.
Yes, I think so, because like I said, the free, prior, and informed consultation in this bill of law, we only have 4 articles, okay, regarding these matters. In these 4 articles, we see they are just general rules, okay? They do not specify the procedures to be assured to make available, applicable to the Indian communities, and how they are the legal and technical effects of the response, of the answer that the community will give to the foundation. So I think there are some major concerns about that, okay? But not only about that, there are a concern about, there is a specific article in this bill of law that says that it's applicable only to the indigenous lands already approved and delimited. There is a problem in Brazil because most of these areas is still in process to be approved. And this bill says that in this case of areas in process should be approved, they can apply for a provisional authorization. They do not need to pass all these stages that I spoke before. And this is a concern also in as well. There is a concern about some governance aspects, okay? The concerns about the conduction of the technical studies and how they can influence the foundation, FUNAI, and the community of Indians. And well, like I said, I'm trying to summarize here. The current status of that is like you said, Alejandro, there was a major concern of the society, many manifestations against and opposition to the products. Just last week, the deputy president of the House of Representatives in Brazil gave an interview saying this bill is being analyzed, but probably it will slow down the procedure. Okay, they will probably take off those expedite procedure, the urgent procedure that I just spoke. Do I still have 1 minute to talk about the bill 490 or not?
Well, if you can do it really quickly in just 1 minute, Thiago, I would like to move to the next topic. But yes, by all means, let's.
Okay, I'm sorry again. I try to summarize it. The bill 490 is important because it intends to modifications in the Indian Institute in Brazil. And this institute is very important because it regulates many aspects about the indigenous communities, but also, and most important, the procedures for recognition, approval, and delimitation of the indigenous lands. And the most controversial aspect of this Bill 490 is that adopts the concept of the temporal mark, of the temporal milestone, okay, which was an interpretation, a creation of the Supreme Court of Brazil in one specific trial against the Raposa Serra do Sol case, that says that basically recognition of the area as indigenous land only if the community possessed the land at the time of the promulgation of the federal constitution in 1988. So if the community, the indigenous community cannot certify that they already had the possession of the land in 1988, they will not be recognized as an Indian land. So this is a huge issue too that is being opposed, faced some huge opposition from the society. I'm sorry again because of the time.
No, thank you so much for that overview, Thiago. And I will be back to you in just a moment because there are certainly a couple issues that I'd like to touch upon. But I would like to move to Marco and ask him about the resolution that took place in March by President Bolsonaro regarding potash exploitation. In March, President Bolsonaro called for the lifting of mining restrictions in indigenous territories, looking to offset the potential shortages, which are actually now being felt less than 2 months later, for fertilizers amid what was at the time escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine. And also, Agriculture Minister in Brazil, Teresa Cristina Diaz, announced that the country was due to launch a national fertilizer plan to stimulate investments in potash and phosphorus mines. Brazil imports more than 80% of its fertilizers to meet its demands, and about 20% of the imports come from Russia. However, Brazilian researchers, and I'm talking specifically about a study by the University of Minas Gerais, according to this research, Bolsonaro is falsely using the Ukraine crisis to advance his mining agenda and these bills that Thiago has just presented an overview about, because most of the country's proven potash reserves are not located on their indigenous reservations. So that's obviously a very important divergence. And I want to ask you, Marco, what is your take on the potential for potash and phosphorus extraction in these territories? Is it as big as the government claims, or is it more limited, like Brazilian researchers have identified?
Okay, Alejandro, thank you very much for the invitation. Thiago, good explanation about the rest. There are some points that I didn't understand very well, so you explained it well. But regarding the potash, we have a big project starting to become a project that it's project Antares. So this project is Altazes, no? That is in a indigenous area. So I think it's 3 billion tons of ore, and then this is in an indigenous area. This is a very new project that is. They are starting to buy lands and put all the project to go on. So this is I think when we are talking about these issues with indigenous lands, we are talking specifically of this because most of the others are not in indigenous area, as you said. So as Ibram said also. But this specific it's not inside, but it's on the side, let's say, of a big area, indigenous area. And according to the law here, you have a range or a radius that you need to, so it's likely the same. So you will be as a part of the indigenous areas, so you will need to have this approval of the teams and so on. Regarding the process, the main points here in Brazil that all this process take a lot of time. So when you talk about mining here, you are talking about 5, 7, 10 years, and sometimes you can have from 3 to 8, 9 years only for permits, studies, and let's say initial studies, consulting populations. The bigger the project, the more time you will take. So this is a huge problem that we have in Brazil here. And the initiative of the president, Mr. Bolsonaro, regarding the timing of Ukraine, Russia, it's good. It's a good timing, because we are really having this problem here. Brazil imports 80% of this potash that he needs for the agriculture, and Brazil is a huge agricultural player. So it's essential to have this, and we have this project. But my understanding, Alejandro, is that the biggest companies, the serious one like Vale, as Ibram said, they will follow the rules. They will follow what we have today until we have a clear and approved law that can make it better, let's say. But they will continue to do these initial studies. They will continue to do the consulting, because if you don't do this now, trying to cut some let's say some part of the road, you will have in the future, because the mining process and the mining projects will not take only 4 or 5 years of let's say a president time. No, they will change in the future. So it's very critical. So it's not only part of the law inside, but also the general community of the world, let's say, that's pushing, have a lot of pressure. And this special Altazes, this project, it's in the middle of the jungle. No, it's so it's a place that you have a lot of issues there for sure. You will have.
Thank you, Marco. That's a very good overview, because it shows the different sides to these issues. On the one hand, there are environmental, social concerns about extractive activities in general. But on the other hand, there is a market need and an economical need for productivity and harnessing the country's deposits, which in the case of Brazil are significant and could potentially reshape some of its economic structures to, for example, showcases the multifaceted aspects of this discussion. Marco, I would like to address the February decree issued by President Bolsonaro, which created a program to support the development of artisanal mining, which is a controversial activity known as garimpo that occupies something of a legal gray area in Brazil. The decree says that the aim is to, and I'm quoting here from the decree, propose public policies and stimulate the development of artisanal and small-scale mining, fostering sustainable development for the region and the nation, end quote. But this comes at a time when deforestation has soared. And I have a statistic here, which is very showy, a vast expanse of the Amazon rainforest, which is estimated to be 7 times larger than the city of London, was destroyed over the course of 2019 and 2020. And this is largely attributed to the disarranged activities by the garimperos, who use mercury to separate gold dust from soil and often mine in protected indigenous reservations. So, Marco, my question to you is, how can large miners and mining investors in Brazil comply with responsible social and environmental standards, even if they are not legally required? For example, we see that the Brazilian government is looking to foster small-scale artisanal mining. It will perhaps have a toll on the environment, but large miners will want to remain within the rules, conduct a socially responsible activity. How can they do it if the legal framework does not perhaps necessarily require it to the same extent it did before?
Yeah, for sure. Alejandro, that's very important to understand that garimpeiros is a very broad term. So you have garimpeiros and like garimpos, not that it's a small mining company. They are completely legal. They follow they have audits in operations and whatever. And we have these very small miners that don't have any kind of support, or they are making operations, let's say, without any kind of legal support, and they do whatever they want. So they are very fast moving, and when they have this gold rush, usually for gold of this kind of material that are have more value, and they are very quick. So this is the main issue that you have the impact on the impact of these small miners. It's much larger in area than all the mines in Brazil. So I worked for Vale, and I remember the first time I went to Carajás, and today I'm here in the area in Marabá. And on my first trip to Vale, to Carajás mine, was a lot of rainforest. And nowadays you don't have more rainforest until you reach Vale. That's is the area that's protected by law, and the Vale company takes care of them. So the point is the industry that have more impact in this part of, it's not the mining industry, but it's the agricultural one. So the impact is very huge. So I think this is an important point. The amount of land that they use is amazing. It's a very important for Brazil also, but this is the main point. But regarding the companies, I don't think that this law will open the gates for do whatever you want is needed to do, but they will provide some support for these operations that are not, let's say, they don't have any kind of audit from the government. But the main point also here in Brazil is the audit from the government, the visits of the agents and so on. They are very poor, so they are focused on the big industry, not on the small ones. So I don't think that the companies will stop to do what they need to do regarding the environment, independently of any kind of law. And I don't think that this law will open very broadly let's say I don't know here in English, but they will open very in a way that they will have a huge impact. I don't know what Bolsonaro is trying to do, but this is what I think.
Thank you, Marco. I would like to follow up with you, Thiago, and ask you again regarding this decree to drive gold prospecting. How, if at all, do these permissions for artisanal and small-scale miners affect existing and prospective licenses for large-scale miners and mining investors? Is there an incidence of some type, or are they completely separate activities?
Okay, thank you, Alejandro. The first thing is Marco already presented to you is to make this separation of legal and illegal procedures, okay? As we call garimpos in Brazil are illegal. They do not have any kind of permissions or concessions to do that, especially in the Amazon forest. But there are some legal permissions that we call permissão de lavra garimpeira. It's a legal permission, so it's a regulated and applicable to some kind of materials and a small scale projects. So I don't think there is a problem related to the legal permissions, okay? We just must fiscalize them, we just must be inspected, the government and the national agencies must do some inspections to make sure that they are okay, the small scale are respected, the environmental concerns and impacts are controlled and things like that. The huge problem is about the illegal procedures, okay? The illegal projects, the people, the garimpeiros, like you said, that invade some of these areas, sometimes in Indian land, sometimes in protect unities, in areas of environmental protection, and that is a problem. So the decrees that was issued by the president, it has, okay, some sensitive points, but it's not a big problem just to facilitate or just to simplify some of the procedures. That I think I agree with Marco. But we must combat, must be enforced the fiscalization and the inspection about the illegal projects in the rainforest. That's the main issue.
Okay, thank you, Thiago. And we are going to open up the room for questions from the audience in just a moment. But before doing so, I would like to ask Thiago one other question, which is the following. The state of Pará is consolidating itself as Brazil's largest mining producer. And it's widening the gap with the runner-up Minas Gerais, which had been historically the largest mining jurisdiction in Brazil. So far in 2021, the income from mining royalties in Pará represented a little over 46% of the nationwide total of $327 million US dollars, while Minas Gerais accounted for 39%, almost 40%, according to the mining regulator in Brazil, ANM. State legislators in Pará have been carrying out a probe since last year via a special commission into the mining costs and benefits for the state. And this has increased pressure on Vale and other miners to invest more in projects in Pará. And it's also threatening to levy more taxes against them. So real quick, Thiago, what can miners and mining investors expect from Pará's legislators, and how will this affect their increasingly large operations in the state, taking into account the increasing environmental concerns that we have been discussing that are taking place nationwide, and also the loosening regulations that we have also touched based on? What can miners and mining investors expect from Parás legislature in the near term?
Okay, Leandro. What I think is, I'm not a tax lawyer, not a specialist tax lawyer, but I'd like to do some comments about that. Important to understand that the production costs in Brazil are already very high. Okay, we already have high taxations in Brazil, pretty much to all kinds of industries. But when we're talking about the mining industry, we also as well have a huge high taxation considering all the production chain. Okay, we need to look not only by the exploitation, the extraction of the minerals, but also the industrialization and the sale and the export of this mineral. Of this mineral. So considering all the production chain, we already have, like I said, a high taxation. The states and the municipalities, the cities, they already collect high values, especially again regarding CFEM, the financial contribution that I spoke before. Okay, just to have an example, in 2021, there was collected in Brazil more than 10 billion of reais in CFEM and distributed, allocated to the cities and to the states. The focus here should be in how the government and the authorities use this money. Okay, they do not collect just there's a high volume of taxation and money going in states and the municipalities, specifically about CFEM. The other thing is the mining companies not only pay CFEM, they pay the annual fee per hectare, they pay the participation of the landowner in the results of the mining, they pay the taxation on profits, taxation on exports of mining materials. So I don't think, in my opinion, of course, this should be an issue, or there should be something to increase or raise taxation. Another discussion, and also there's an important thing, there is a limit to the states in Brazil to legislate about taxation, okay? Like we say, against, for an example, like CFEM, the financial contribution, this is under the federal jurisdiction. States cannot change or create any kind of laws regarding that issue. But another discussion that I think that we must have with all these authorities, apart of the taxation, but also related to this, is about the need for investments by mining companies in Brazil to ensure the safety of the mining projects, especially about the tailing dams. Okay, we must remember the horrors of the accidents in tailing dams in Brazil in 2015, in 2019, and we have this needed for investments by mining companies in projects, in safety of the project minings, and also to compensate the environmental impacts of these projects. Okay, we do have in Brazil a strong regulation about that. So what I'm saying is the costs are already very high. I don't see if we have a room for the increase or raise of taxation in mining in Brazil now.
Thank you, Thiago. Thank you. That's all very insightful. And I would like to move to questions from the audience. Anyone in the audience who would like to ask our panelists, please feel free to post on the chat. For now, we have a question from John, which I will address to Thiago, but Marco, by all means, feel free to chime in. Thiago, how likely do you think it is that these legislative proposals that we have been discussing are going to be passed in Congress in an election year?
Well, objectively, I think it's unlikely we will pass all these regulations, okay? Like John just said here, we're facing an election year in Brazil, a presidential election here in Brazil in November, the end of the year. We are already facing many political controversies in the country. When the government presented this bill of laws in the Congress, there was a strong opposition against them. And I don't think that even not only the government, but the investors as well they did not buy this project, not supporting this project, because they are concerned, like I said, about the ESG conceptions. They are concerned about that. They know this can be a very bad exposition to the media for them. So I don't think there's a good chance to this proposal should be approved in Congress in this years. Maybe if President Bolsonaro be re-elected, we will face the same discussions in the next 4 years. But now in these years, I don't think this is going to happen.
Thank you, Thiago. Marco, I don't know if there's something else you'd like to add to the...
No, I agree. I agree with Thiago, totally. So I think there's no chance now for any kind of change in the law, approval of any law. In the future, we cannot say, but they are not easy laws to approve. So there is a lot of discussion, people talking about that. There's a lot of pressure inside and outside Brazil. So it's not I don't think that we will change. And regarding the other subject that Thiago commented regarding the taxation, I know that here in Pará, the government, I don't think they will put more taxes. I totally agree with Thiago. We have enough taxes, too much, and sometimes we need to give some incentive to the mining or other companies. But what the government here in Pará is asking is for, let's say, not only the mining, because they saw this large amount of minerals going out, and we can talk about the iron ore that's 200 million tons a year. And they say, okay, we sell a lot of material, we sell copper, we sell other minerals, and okay, but it doesn't generate jobs here. We want that there is some kind of work of these companies to move to have like the secondary step, let's say, of steel making here or copper. So this is what the government here is trying to have. So they want that some of this material can be, let's say, manufactured here. So that what they try with Vale, with steel making. Vale made an investment, but not here. So they are very angry with Vale. And so that's a point that the government here is trying to have this. It's not easy, because most of the iron it's easier, but it's high impact on the environmental, and a lot of money. Vale doesn't put more money on this kind of industry. So this is the main point that the government here is trying to let's say, to have here. More industry, more jobs.
Thank you, Marco. To either Marco or Thiago or both you guys, there is a term in English that is called the lame duck period, which is essentially the period between after an election is decided, after a presidential candidate is elected, but before that administration begins. That time frame in English is usually called the lame duck period. And I would like to ask you, is it viable, in your opinion, to pass these controversial laws in that period after the presidential election is settled, but before the administration comes into effect?
Okay, I can answer that if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think so, because I understand there are some peculiarities about the legislative procedures in the US and very different here in Brazil. The thing is, to pass these projects, this bill of law, we'll need a political agreement between the president, and even if he's not reelected, and the House of the Representatives and the Senate. Bolsonaro has some kind of good, how can I say, he has an open space to dialogue with the presidents of the House of the Representatives, of the president of the Senate, but he doesn't control specifically all the National Congress, okay? And like you said, there was a strong opposition to this project, not only NGOs, politicians, and many others, but also for some parties that support President Bolsonaro. See how complex this is. So I understand this, the lame duck period, like you said, but I don't think it's unlikely to pass in this government or even in this specific period. I think we can have this discussion. We may have to face these discussions in the next government if President Bolsonaro will be re-elected.
Thank you, Thiago. Marco, I don't know if you have anything else to
No,
add.
I agree. There is something that Mr. Bolsonaro does very well, that's noise. And this kind of project have to do a lot of noise. So I don't think that they will be approved now, and I don't think in the future also. So I don't think that will happen, for sure.
Thank you, Thiago and Marco. We are nearing the end of our chat today. I would like to, I don't think there are any more questions from our audience. So I would like to go ahead and first of all, thank Thiago and Marco for joining us for these very interesting insights. Like we have mentioned, Brazil is a very important mining jurisdiction, not only in Latin America, but at a worldwide level. And these issues that we have discussed, as well as many others that are applicable to the industry, are always front and center in investors' minds. So thank you both for taking the time and the time to talk to us and present all these issues. Thank you everyone in who joined the call, all our attendees. We are going to be circulating the video of this chat to everyone on our distribution list so that you can listen to it for future reference. And we would finally like to invite everyone to our next coffee chat, which is going to take place on Tuesday, June the 7th. And we will be rolling out our invitations soon, but it will also be touching on interesting and top of mind issues regarding mining in the region. So we would kindly like to invite everyone to join that chat. And at this point, I would just like to thank again everyone, Thiago, Marco. We really appreciate your time. Look forward to talking to you again. And to all our attendees, have a great week ahead, and we will be in touch.